4 years of riding Japanese dual sport motorcycles, from an XT250 to a Suzuki DR650. Here's what I think. Hello, D-Rock here. Welcome to the channel. I hope you all are well. That's right, 4 years of strictly riding Japanese dual sport motorcycles. Now, I want to first off say I have no experience with the European dual sports, like Husqvarnas or the KTMs, and I don't have any experience with the Chinese, like the Cove. So I can't speak for any of those bikes because I've never ridden any of them. I've strictly ridden Japanese dual sports for the last 4 years, from a Yamaha XT250, a Honda CRF 300L, KLR 650, both the Gen 2 and the Gen 3, a Yamaha TW200, and of course the Suzuki DR650. And overall, I think they're fantastic bikes, and I'll probably stick to these bikes. So I just want to go over a few points from my experience over the last 4 years with the Japanese dual sports and why I think they are an excellent choice if you're just getting into riding dual sport motorcycles, or you may want to switch over from what you're currently riding and all those things. So let's get started. So when I got into riding dual sport motorcycles, my sole purpose initially was to use the motorcycle for exploration. And that pretty much is still my sole purpose for riding dual sport motorcycles, because they're dual sports. You can ride them on the asphalt and then take them off-road to continue. So you've got, for lack of a better term, the best of both worlds. And my first bike was the Yamaha XT250, and then they just multiplied. Boom! That's just swan dive into all the platforms that I could afford. And it's been a little tough with the price increases with registration, insurance, and everything. So I'll probably have to thin the herd here soon, but that's okay. So my number one thing, like I mentioned, is I wanted to explore. And my terrain that I generally ride in the most is desert. So I needed something that I knew would be absolutely reliable. I like to go 100 miles deep into the desert. I've plenty of videos demonstrating this, or long distances and then cut off into the desert or the mountains or wherever. And from my research initially, the Japanese bikes were the way to go as far as reliability. That's where I'll begin with, and that's the most important thing to me, is reliability. And from my experience with all the bikes I've been riding over the last 4 years, reliability is hands down fantastic. None of them have left me stranded deep in the desert. They've all got me back out of where I went. So that being said, I had one failure with the XT250 where I was out in the desert and I was doing something, I can't remember, but the battery died. I turned the motorcycle off, but the key was still on, so the light was on and it just drained the battery. I hadn't ridden it for a while, so the battery was weak, and I had to bump start it to get out of there. It wasn't a problem. Other than that, I've had no failures deep in the backcountry, knock on whatever. I know it's always a possibility, but with the bikes I ride, I feel pretty much confident. I have peace of mind that they're going to get me back from where I'm going. So overall, with my experience with the Japanese dual sports, is that reliability is the number one thing that invites me to purchase these bikes. So I'll go ahead and also say this, because I get this comment a lot, because I own all these bikes. If I had one bike to choose out of all of them, and I could only have one, what bike would that be? It would be the Suzuki DR650. And I'll tell you why. Number one, reliability. Number two, the bike is just, it can be built to exactly what you want. So I've built this bike heavier, larger gas tank, armored, see, comfort and heavier. So is kind of a mini like KLR, because I'm going to sell my KLR. You can build it lighter, trim it down, slim it down, take things off. You can make it bigger. You can do whatever you want to this bike, and it's going to pretty much do what you want. And it's still on the heavy side to a degree, so if you have to get on the interstate, it works. This bike's just fine on the interstate, doing 75 miles an hour. I don't get bothered by wind. It's still light enough that I feel pretty good about riding solo off-road, like just like beyond typical forest roads. If the terrain gets a little technical, I'm okay. But overall, the whole scope of things, if I only had one bike, it would be the DR650, just because I can manipulate the bike into so many different things or styles that I want. So that's the answer to that question. So what is the most fun bike I own? The most fun bike I own is the Yamaha XT250. Hands down, without a doubt, I have the most fun on this bike. I go so deep in the backcountry on this bike, and I have complete and utter confidence it's going to get me back. I have just beat the hell out of this bike. I even crashed 40 miles an hour, broke all my ribs and everything, and this bike barely got a scratch. It's just been an absolute hoot. Yes, there are some drawbacks with it because of its size and weight and stuff. It's just lighter and all this, you know, if you were to get on the interstate or something of that nature. But overall, this is the most fun bike I own. I absolutely love the XT250. And if you can, everyone should have one of these bikes. They're just absolutely a hoot, bulletproof. You can't go wrong with the Yamaha XT250. So, in regards to the XT250, both the XT250 and the CRF 300L, I have just been brutal with these bikes. Now, I'm not saying I go out and intentionally try and destroy the bikes. I never do that with any of my equipment. However, I do ride these bikes pretty hard for my skill level. And the Honda here is my #1 backcountry moto camping bike. I'm going to build out the Yamaha slowly. I've got some pannier racks and all the stuff I'm going to be adding here in the near future whenever I get around to it. But I still just choose when I know the terrain's going to probably be technical. Not crazy, I'm not talking about enduro stuff, but just I'm going off forest roads and it may get a little interesting. I always take the CRF 300L. I have absolute 100% confidence in this bike. I've taken it through some just hard stuff, and it's always got me back. I've beat this bike down, I've ridden hard, always starts, so I have no problems with that. I've worked both these bikes really hard, and they've endured and proved to be fantastic bikes. So I have, peace of mind is very important to me when I'm out in the backcountry. I need to know that whatever platform I choose to take out there is going to get me back. That's my #1 thing, because at certain times of the year, or especially in the desert, this literally can be a life or death situation. There's countless examples of this, and I need to know whatever I'm riding out there is going to get me back. I'm just referring to what I spoke about earlier in this video. And both these bikes, the 250 and the 300L, for me, have been flawless in that regards. One other thing I like about the Japanese dual sports is that getting parts is relatively easy. Now, I had some hiccups when the Gen 3 KLR came out, the 2022 models. Everything, I mean, it was a run on it, man, let me tell you. So getting parts for this initially was difficult. However, now, not a problem. The 300L was kind of that way in the beginning. XT250, yeah, not a problem. And the Suzuki DR650 is an excellent example. There's parts everywhere. There's never a problem getting parts for the DR650. However, now things have simmered down with all these bikes, like the 300L and the KLR. Getting parts for these bikes is easy. I know some of the newer bikes, you can't get things. They're hard to get. I don't know if that's how it is in the beginning for all of them until third parties catch up. But for me, my experience, getting parts for the bikes have been relatively easy to come by. So another advantage of the Japanese dual sports is the price of the bikes. They're all relatively affordable. Not just new, but used. You can get great used bikes already built out for excellent prices. So you can usually get a steal on a great used Japanese dual sport. But the most expensive bike I own out of all these would probably be the DR650, which came in just probably $1,000 more than the new KLR 650. Still under $10,000. But yeah, I think a lot of, I think with the KTMs and such, they're pretty expensive. Like they're above $10,000, like the 390 and is it the 501? I'm not 100% sure. I don't really know much about those bikes. But that's another thing I like about the Japanese dual sports is the price. And that's a big deal these days. So you can get into whether it be a used bike or a new bike for under 10 grand and be ready to hit the road for some serious adventure. Also, with the Japanese dual sports, another thing that really draws me to them is the ease of maintenance. I'm no certified tech. I'll admit that. When I got into riding dual sports, I really didn't know anything about maintenance for motorcycles. And I had to learn these things, you know, whether it be changing oils or changing out a flat tire, all these little things. Now, I'm not talking about adjusting valves or anything more complicated than that, but general maintenance on all the bikes that I've owned has been absolutely easy. Easy, and not just the ease of maintenance, but the lack of maintenance. I don't have to continually do oil change with these bikes. For example, the CRF300L, in between 6,000 to 7,000 miles on oil changes, it's just incredible. So that's another thing that keeps me with the Japanese bikes is that ease of maintenance or lack thereof. So I just don't have time, and I don't want to spend a lot of time wrenching on bikes. I want to be able to go. So not having to consistently do that is a big up for me. One other thing I want to touch at real quick is that I went from the Gen 2 KLR 650 to the Gen 3 specifically for fuel injection because when it gets hot here in the low desert, I go high up into the mountains. We're talking 10,000 feet, and I was worried I'd have issues with the carburetor, so that's why I wanted the fuel injection. Once I got the DR650, carbureted still, of course, same bike from 1996, I believe. I rode this up to 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 feet. I haven't had any issues with the carburetor. Now, that's just my experience, but that shouldn't hold you back from looking into, say, the DR650 or even a Gen 2 KLR. I don't think it's really an issue, to be honest with you. If you keep the carb clean, run the bike weekly, or use ethanol-free gas, all these things, I don't really think you're going to have an issue. So just wanted to touch on that real quick. All right, it's a lot of positives, right, for the Japanese dual sports. Are there any cons? Well, yes, there are some cons. So from my experience with all these bikes, what are the major cons that I think? I think the biggest one would probably be weight of the bikes. Now, I think with some of the European bikes, they're a lot lighter and you've got a little more power. Some would say some of these bikes are heavier and underpowered. Maybe that's true, maybe not. I think it all depends on the individual. For me, it hasn't held me back from absolutely enjoying myself and getting out there and riding. So I think if anything, maybe they are a little heavy and could use a little less weight, but what do I know, you know? I'm not a professional. And for what I do and how I ride and where I ride, all of them work just fine for me. The only bike that really kind of gets me a little concerned would be the KLR 650. It's a big, heavy bike, and it's just, I don't take it out and do serious backcountry riding in it. I never have. It's the only bike I ride that conservative. Tame dirt roads in the desert, forest roads up in the mountains, yeah, it's not a problem. I do a lot of solo riding, but that would be the only bike. And as far as the others, no. One other con with a lot of these bikes is a lack of a sixth gear. Now, the CRF300L does have a sixth gear. However, the bigger bikes like the KLR and the Suzuki, no sixth gear. And on the Suzuki, I don't really notice it. However, on the KLR, when I'm on the interstate, I am searching for that sixth gear. So that could be a pretty heavy con for a lot of people. But those two things, weight and lack of sixth gear, I think are probably the main gripes that I'm aware of. I'm sure you could find more. There's always cons if you look hard enough. But overall, yeah, that's about it for me. So there you have it. if you're just getting into dual sport motorcycle riding and you're really wondering what you want to get into, I highly suggest looking at Japanese dual sports. All the models that I have experience with have been absolutely fantastic and have done exactly what I wanted to for the most part. They've got me out there. They've got me exploring, adventure. Absolutely. I don't really have much negative to say about them. So that being said, appreciate you watching. We got lots more content on the way. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. It helps us out tremendously. It is free. You all stay safe out there. We'll see you next time. D-Rock out. Adios.